They say a man doesn't own the land. He borrows it from the people who walk it after him. My father used to say that every time we patched a fence or watched a storm roll across Coal Valley, the soil here isn't perfect, it's clay and rock and stubborn grass, but it's honest. My grandfather carved a life out of it when fences were made of cedar and promises. He left a single rule written in the farmhouse ledger: never sell, never lease, never let a paper stranger tell you where your boundary ends. I didn't think much about that rule until the morning I found stakes hammered into our east pasture. Orange flags fluttered in the wind like they were celebrating something I didn't approve of. I thought it was the county at first, maybe marking drainage for a new culvert. But then I saw the truck white shiny, with the letters Ridgeview Estates, HOA, Development Division printed on the door. They had maps spread across the hood, lines drawn in thick digital ink that crossed right over my irrigation ditch and into my grazing field like I didn't exist. When I asked what they were doing, the man in the hard hat said, "Preliminary grading survey." Sir. He called me sir the way city men do when they think it'll calm you down. I told him he was 50 feet inside private property. He said, "We've got clearance from the board." I asked, "What board?" He just smiled and said, "You'll be notified." I spent that night in my father's study, the smell of old oil and cedar hanging in the air. The ledger sat where he'd left it, heavy and unassuming, pages yellowed but clean. Every deed, plat, and survey from 1924 onward was catalogued by hand, and there, in his precise cursive, was the eastern boundary line survey coordinates, notarized, filed, renewed. The ditch was ours. The soil past it was ours. No confusion, no overlap. The notification came 3 days later. A letter embossed with a gold seal and a logo that looked like a mountain wrapped in laurel leaves. Ridgeview Estates Homeowners Association, Incorporated. The tone was formal, polite, and utterly wrong. It claimed that the HOA had jurisdiction over shared greenway areas, including adjacent runoff basins and maintenance easements. It instructed me to remove my fencing and refrain from interfering with community infrastructure. It ended with the words, "Failure to comply may result in legal action and penalties." I read it twice, then poured a cup of black coffee and called my daughter Grace. She works out of Denver, civil engineer. Too smart for half the people she works under. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey Dad," she said. I could hear city noise behind her. Traffic and hum. "You sound like you're about to break something." "I might," I said. "Got a letter saying I'm part of a homeowners association I never joined." She laughed, then realized I wasn't joking. "Send it to me," she said. "I'll run the parcels through the county GIS and see what they think they own." Grace called back that night. "Dad," she said quietly, "they filed an amended plat map 2 months ago. It extends their subdivision boundary across the drainage and into your east pasture. The approval signature is from the county surveyor's office, but the stamp looks off, like someone photocopied it." "Forgery?" I asked. "Could be," she said. "At best, sloppy. At worst, intentional." That was the first crack in Ridgeview's polished facade. The second came the next morning when I found my irrigation gate padlocked shut with a brand new lock that wasn't mine. There was a laminated tag hanging from it. HOA property. Do not tamper. I drove into town to see the county clerk. Old Mr. Branson was still behind the counter, half blind but sharp as a saw. He pulled the plat on his monitor, squinted and frowned. "That ain't the signature I stamped," he said. "And that map was filed on a Friday after hours. Nobody here approves anything after 4 p.m. He printed it anyway and signed a statement confirming his observation. I thanked him, bought him a coffee, and drove home thinking of my grandfather's rule. Never let a paper stranger tell you where your boundary ends. The next week, bulldozers showed up. Not on my side yet, but close enough to make the earth tremble under the kitchen windows. They carved a trench that bled runoff directly toward my grazing lot. When I confronted the foreman, he told me it was a temporary drainage easement. I told him to produce a permit. He shrugged. "Talk to the board," he said. "Talk to Victoria Hall." I'd met her once, briefly, at a county zoning meeting. Hair like polished copper, voice like a real estate commercial, always smiling when she didn't need to. She wore high heels to the meeting on gravel. That told me everything. When she saw me walking up her construction lane, she didn't look surprised, just annoyed. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you really should have come to the community planning sessions." "I don't live in your community," I said. She tapped a clipboard. "Actually, according to the revised plats," I cut her off. "The forged one." She blinked but didn't flinch. "We're within our rights. You can challenge it if you like, but I'd advise cooperation. You'll benefit from property upgrades once the HOA completes Phase 2, paved roads, lighting, higher property values." I laughed. "Lady, I'm not looking for I'm looking for the truth." That night, the first retaliation came. A violation notice nailed to my front gate. "Unauthorized livestock grazing on community property, fined $1,200. The audacity almost made me smile. They thought this was a game of letters. They didn't know the Coles kept better records than most courthouses. Grace drove down that weekend, laptop under her arm, hair tied back like her mother used to when she meant business. "They're filing under a shell company," she said. Ridgeview Estates HOA LLC is owned by Apex Horizon Development Group, same company that built those cookie-cutter homes west of here. She opened a folder on her screen, and guess who approved their drainage permits? A consulting engineer who's been fined twice for falsified environmental reports. We built our case like we built fences line by line, post by post. Grace cross-referenced every survey point. I documented every act of trespass. We filed formal complaints with the county, then with the state land board. Silence. Paper vanished in bureaucracy. Then, one evening near sundown, I heard engines on the ridge. I stepped outside and saw 2 pickup trucks parked by the drainage ditch. Men in reflective vests were cutting my fence. One of them waved when he saw me, not friendly. I walked down the slope slowly, camera in hand, recording everything. "You're trespassing," I said. One of them grinned. "Not according to our map." He yanked another section of wire loose. I called the sheriff. Deputy Lawson showed up 20 minutes later, slow and uncertain. "Mr. Cole," he said, "they've got a permit here." He held up a paper stamped with the county seal. I took one look and laughed. That's the same forgery Branson disowned. Lawson didn't know what to do. He was young, new, not ready for politics, disguised as paperwork. He told them to pack up for now and promised to check with the office. I thanked him anyway. 2 days later, Grace forwarded me an email chain she'd been CC'd on accidentally. It was between Apex Horizon executives. One line stood out: "If Cole resists, pressure him through code enforcement and environmental citations. Force mediation." That night, I sat by the fireplace and stared at the flames until dawn. There's a moment when anger stops feeling like heat and starts feeling like gravity. I remembered the old drainage channel my grandfather cut by hand, a trench that redirected runoff safely downhill, lined with limestone and clay. If they wanted to play with water, they should have studied the land first. Grace arrived the next morning with coffee and resolve. "We can prove hydrologic manipulation," she said. "If they rerouted flow without proper grade control, we can document it. The slope and culvert angles will tell the story." We spent 3 days measuring, photographing, mapping. She drafted a report dense enough to choke a bureaucrat. Tables of elevations, rainfall data, sediment levels, times. We backed it with drone footage showing their trench cutting across natural grade. It was evidence no lawyer could spin clean. When we delivered it to Finch and Hardy, our law firm of choice, the senior partner read it twice, then smiled. "They've stepped in it," he said. "You've got falsified plats, environmental negligence, and criminal misrepresentation. Let's give them a chance to hang themselves politely." The letter we sent was 10 pages long, written in calm surgical language. It outlined every infraction, cited every statute, and ended with a single sentence: "The Cole family hereby demands immediate cessation of all unauthorized activity and restoration of property to its original surveyed boundaries within 10 business days." On day 3, Victoria Hall showed up again, this time with a lawyer and a county liaison in tow. She parked by the barn like she owned it, heels sinking into the mud. "You've gone too far, Mr. Cole," she said. "Filing false claims against a registered HOA can constitute harassment." I handed her a copy of her own forged plat map. "That's not registered," I said. "That's fabricated." The liaison, a nervous man with a badge, looked from her to me, then to the map. "I'll need to verify this." "You do that," I said. They left, tires spinning, leaving ruts deep enough to hold puddles. Grace and I stood in silence until the sound of engines faded. She looked up at me. "They're scared," she said. "Good, they should be." The next week was quiet, too quiet. Then came the storm. A summer squall rolled off the mountains with wind that made the barn doors groan. When I checked the drainage at dawn, I found their trench had overflowed, washing half their construction lane into my pasture. Their runoff had nowhere to go but back the way it came. Nature had taken sides. We documented everything: videos, water levels, times. Grace built a 3D model showing how their illegal grading redirected flow, violating every county hydrology code on the books. Finch filed for an emergency injunction and damages. Court day came fast. The HOA rolled in with 4 lawyers, glossy exhibits, and a PowerPoint presentation about community improvement. We came in with a single binder and the truth. Finch's voice never rose above conversational tone. He walked the judge through every deed, every coordinate, every photograph. He called Grace to testify. She explained slope ratios, runoff coefficients, and hydrologic models so clearly even the stenographer stopped typing to listen. Then Finch presented the kicker: the affidavit from Mr. Branson, the county clerk, verifying the signature forgery, and the internal Apex Horizon email trail proving intent to coerce. The judge leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said, "This court finds Ridgeview Estates and its affiliated parties liable for fraudulent filings, unlawful drainage modification, and trespass. All claims against Mr. Cole are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, damages and restoration costs are to be paid in full by the defendants." Silence. Then Victoria whispered something to her lawyer and walked out before the gavel even fell. The next months were slow but satisfying. Heavy machinery tore up Ridgeview's illegal trench. Surveyors restored the boundary markers. Grass grew back. The HOA's funds evaporated under legal fees. Apex Horizon filed bankruptcy before Christmas. Grace and I spent one last evening by the repaired drainage, watching water run the way it was meant to. The sky turned amber, the kind of color my father used to call honest light. She said softly, "You think they'll ever learn?" I shrugged. Developers don't listen to land. They listen to profit. But maybe the next one will think twice. She smiled. "You're famous online. Someone uploaded the court recording. People are calling you the drainage dad." I laughed for the first time in months. Could be worse. A week later, a letter arrived, plain envelope, no seal. Inside was a single photo, Victoria Hall standing in front of a new billboard, Harborview Ranch, where community meets country charm. A dotted line snaked right along a creek bed 2 miles south of our land, the kind of creek that swells fast in spring. I pinned the photo to the corkboard above my desk and looked out across the valley. The grass shimmered, alive again. The fence line gleamed silver in the morning sun. I whispered, half to the land, half to my father, "We're still here." And then, maybe because old habits die hard, I wrote a note to myself in the ledger. If they ever draw the line wrong again, let the truth flow downhill. So tell me, if it were your land, if your grandfather's fence was erased on paper and someone claimed your soil belonged to their community, would you have fought back the way I did? Would you trust the paperwork, the rainfall, and your own blood to prove what's right? Or would you have let them build their dream on your dirt? Drop your take in the comments, because some lessons in this world still have to be learned the hard way, one boundary at a time.